Sometimes what looks like a balloon isn't a balloon. Oscar Huerta, a pilot in the Peruvian Air Force, in 1980 followed orders to shoot down a weather balloon, but every time he tried, it darted away. Flying closer, he realized it wasn't a balloon at all. Let's explore. Hi everyone and welcome to Project Bluebook, where we explore all things unidentified. I am Thor and thanks for tuning in. In the early morning hours of April 11th, 1980, a 27-year-old Air Force lieutenant in the Peruvian Air Force, Oscar Santa Maria Huerta, 8 years veteran of fighter pilot, received an assignment to participate in a military exercise involving 1,800 military and civilian personnel at the La Joya Air Force Base, 1,000 kilometers south of the Peruvian capital of Lima. After takeoff, Lieutenant Huerta climbed to around 8,000 feet when he received orders to intercept a silvery balloon-shaped object hovering about 2,000 feet above the end of the runway. He flew his Russian-made Sukhoi 22 fighter jet to intercept the object, thought to be a spy balloon, a wayward weather balloon, or even a distressed hot air balloon, positioned in restricted and controlled airspace, posing threat to the exercise drill as well as the air traffic around the airbase. At about 5 kilometers distance, around 2.7 nautical miles, Huerta fired a burst of 60 30mm shells, creating a cone-shaped lethal distribution, a wall of fire sufficient to obliterate any size weather balloon at any altitude. To his surprise, the object darted upwards almost before he fired. It happened so quickly, he had to orient towards the object's new position, almost straight up and ahead, at almost 7,000 feet altitude. He fired his afterburners and gave chase to try firing at the strange balloon a second time, and again the balloon moved away in an instant. Huerta interestingly said as follows, quote, "Even one of the bullets would have obliterated a car," end quote, which is an interesting statement in light of recent events over Alaska, Canada, and Michigan, where U.S. and Canadian Air Force pilots, under orders from NORAD to shoot their objects down, that they described in the exact same way, like compact cars. Back in 1980, Huerta also compared the object to the size of a compact car. In Huerta's own words, quote, "I began closing in on it until I had it in perfect sight. I locked on the target and was ready to shoot. But just at that moment, the object made another fast climb, evading the attack. I was left underneath it. It broke the attack." End quote. His second rain of fire did no damage to the balloon whatsoever. It just shot upward, yet again, and parked itself at a new high altitude position as if observing what he would do next. Huerta fired his afterburners again, and this time climbed to almost 40,000 feet to take a closer look. He flew as close as he could to see for himself what this object actually was, and what means of propulsion it had to be able to change its altitude position so rapidly. Remember, this was 1980, about a decade before the first drones were developed and deployed by the U.S. military during Desert Storm, not including propeller-guided decoys, slow-flying unmanned surveillance and radio planes, which have been in existence since World War II. He came to about a half a mile distance when he realized what it was, or rather, what it wasn't. He stated he was startled to see that the balloon wasn't a balloon at all. It was a solid, bright colored object with an intense reflection, and it was metallic, measuring about 10 meters or 32 feet in diameter, with a shiny dome on top, light cream in color. The bottom was wider and circular in shape, silvery in color. It definitely looked to be made out of metal, but it lacked any sign of typical aircraft components that would make it capable of flying or being controlled. It had no wings, no propellers, no control surfaces, vertical or horizontal, and it had no jet engines or exhausts. There were no windows, no antennas, no external equipment at all. It was smooth as a porcelain bowl, upside down, floating in the sky, making maneuvers far beyond human-made aircraft capabilities. Being an aviation buff, as well as a fighter pilot, he said it clearly had capabilities he had not seen any type of aircraft capable of in his life, nor that he knew existed. It was in that moment that he had to admit to himself this was no spying device, but a genuine UFO, something totally unknown. It was a reality jolt, like his reality shifted in that very moment, in the midst of the experience, while controlling a fighter jet high in the air. That had to be some experience. But his fighter pilot instinct kicked in, and he fired a third round of bullets, convinced this time he got it. He was so close. But it was as if the craft fully absorbed the bullets into its body. He literally saw the bullets disappear into it, but without harming it at all. And then the object ascended rapidly, moving upwards to a height of what he estimated to be above 60,000 feet, considerably above his airplane's specifications. And he realized he couldn't follow. He was running low on fuel and had to return to the airport. He got scared at this moment, fully aware this unidentified flying object could return fire, attack him, and do away with him at will. He was outmaneuvered and expected to be shot down at any moment. With his engine sputtering, he had to glide down to the airport, zigzagging along the way down to make the plane harder to hit, while looking back, hoping, only hoping, it wasn't coming after him. He thought it would. He had, after all, tried to shoot it down 3 times. But it didn't. It remained stationary at a high altitude, and he saw it diminishing in size into distance as he safely made it to the runway and landed. What he learned later was that scores of people, military and civilian, on the ground at the airport saw his dogfight with the object, saw him firing at it, and still saw it hovering high above him, reflecting the sunlight as a shiny small dot in the morning sky. From the moment he first flew after it to the moment he landed, it remained visible as a silvery reflective dot in the sky for almost 2 more hours. Many at the airport were required to file an incident report of what they saw. The account exists by their multiple eyewitness accounts. A June 1980 report from the U.S. Department of Defense, titled UFO Sighted in Peru, describes this incident, stating only that the object remains of unknown origin. Until perhaps recently, it was one of only 2 acknowledged Air Force pilot encounters with UFO that involved intentional use of fire at a UFO. The other incident involved a pilot in the Iranian Air Force in 1976, 3 years before the Iranian Revolutionary Guard took reins, when Iran was governed by Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, an ally of the United States at the time, and that pilot's name was General Parviz Jafari. He attempted to fire from his F-14, I'm guessing, because that's what the Iranian Air Force had pre-revolution, at a UFO described in very similar terms as the one encountered by Oscar Huerta, but his equipment oddly malfunctioned for reasons unknown. The F-14 weapons systems are known not to malfunction, ever. That's a quote from one of its developers. How do we know all this? Lieutenant Oscar Huerta retired a colonel and came forward to tell his story in Leslie Kean's 2010 landmark book, UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record. General Jafari's account was recorded as well. Colonel Huerta was also one of the multiple military officers who came forward on April 29, 2013, at the National Press Club Association's Citizens Hearing on UFOs in Washington, D.C., to testify on the account of these events. In his writings, Huerta has noted that the Peruvian Air Force, flying Soviet-made planes at the time in 1980, at the height of the Cold War, was aware of the interest in their military hardware, in particular by the United States, not necessarily allied with Peru at the time. So the assumption of a spying device hovering nearby during the military exercise, while they were flying Soviet-made aircraft, this was to be expected. Reflecting on the incident 30 years later, Huerta stated, quote, "I find myself in the unique position, at least for the moment, and as far as I know, of being the only military pilot in the world who has actually fired a weapon and struck a UFO. It still gives me the chills to think about it." End quote. His statement held true, that he was the only pilot on record firing rounds at a UFO, until the first weekend of February 2023. You can watch and listen to this and other podcasts on Project Bluebook, where we explore all things unidentified. Each day, let's practice compassion and kindness. And please subscribe. I am Thor, and thanks for tuning in. See you next time.